Okay, let's make our high protein iced coffee tiramisu. If you've ever had tiramisu, you are familiar with this dessert. It's a layered dessert. It usually starts with a layer of a special cookie called a ladyfinger. I don't know why it's called that. They're a little hard to find, so we are going to use a substitute. We're going to use a very simple graham cracker, which I'll show you in a minute. And then usually what happens is that cookie is soaked with espresso coffee. And we're going to use our high protein iced coffee to stand in for that. And then there's a very rich and creamy filling, which we're going to duplicate with something else that's not quite so rich and not quite so creamy, but very delicious, and also uses some of our high protein iced coffee. And then it's usually dusted with cocoa powder, which we're also going to do. Now, before I start, one thing I wanted to say is I surprised you guys by making desserts, because I don't do this very often, but when the high protein iced coffee came out, I just thought this was just such a natural thing to do with it. And, you know, why not once in a while make a healthier version of a dessert that's pretty rich and pretty high in calories? And of course, we're going to get some protein as well, which is great. If you don't have high protein iced coffee yet in your market, don't despair, because the other thing I did when I was developing this recipe was I worked on an alternative. And so you can do an alternative by mixing protein drink mix and some instant coffee. Okay, so today I'm going to use the regular high protein iced coffee for my tiramisu, but we're going to post both recipes for you so that if you don't have the high protein iced coffee, you can use the PDM and instant coffee version. It's still just as good. Okay, all right, so let's get started. As I said, the base of your tiramisu normally would have this ladyfinger cookie. So what I'm using is just a good old American graham cracker. These are, if you're not familiar with these, if you're in another country where you don't have these, it's kind of like a tea biscuit. It's just very thin, it's crisp, it's mildly sweet, it's pretty plain. And when we buy them here in the US, they come in these little sheets. So we call this 2 squares of graham crackers. So we cut it in half. So we are going to use 4 squares or 2 of these sheets of our graham cracker. And I'm just going to roll them a little bit so I can crush them up into crumbs. You can do this with your hands if you want to, but I always look for an excuse to get out my old-fashioned rolling pin. And so just putting it in a plastic bag and rolling it just very gently, just enough to break it up into some graham cracker crumbs that we're going to sprinkle on the bottom. If you don't have a rolling pin, you can do this with your hands. It's totally fine. But you guys know that I love these, you know, I seek out these old-fashioned implements when I go to flea markets and antique stores, because I always tell you some of these older instruments are so much better than the new ones. All right, so that's all crushed. And now what we're going to do is we're going to put this in the base of our little pudding dishes here. So we're making a total of 4 servings. And I'm just going to divide this crushed up graham cracker. And don't worry if they're not like super fine crumbs. It doesn't really matter. You just want them broken up a little bit. But the reason that we're putting these down here first is, as I said, to kind of duplicate what happens with a tiramisu, or almost more like a cheesecake maybe. But the graham cracker is going to go on the bottom, and now we're going to put another layer in there that's going to soak into the graham cracker. So let's do that. Let me put this out of the way for a minute. So the next layer is, this is really simple. We're going to take 8 teaspoons of water, and I'm going to add 8 teaspoons of my high protein iced coffee. And this is going to end up now just being the base, and it's going to just soak into that graham cracker. So that's going to go like that. So what this is doing is this is replacing what would be the espresso. So normally you would put some espresso coffee. And this is just a little, just to give it a little bit of flavor. As I said, what's going to happen, because this is going to go in the refrigerator, is it's going to allow this to kind of soak into the graham cracker, just give it a little bit richer of that coffee flavor, which is what we're after. All right, so that goes in there, very simple. We can kind of swirl that around a little bit, just enough to to cover it. And then we're going to put our next layer on top. All right, so we've got our graham cracker base, and then we've got our 8 teaspoons of high protein iced coffee and our 8 teaspoons of water sitting on top. Okay, so setting that aside. Now for the filling, what we're going to do is we're going to take a half a cup of water, and I'm going to add to this now 4 scoops of our high protein iced coffee. And we're going to blend this up with a whisk. We want this to get nice and smooth. We want to be sure this is really well dissolved before we add the remaining ingredients. All right, and this already, you know, even though this isn't even hot, I love the smell of this product because it just smells like freshly brewed coffee. It's so good. All right, and then the other thing that's going to go in. So normally with tiramisu, you use something called mascarpone cheese, which is very rich and very creamy. It's delicious. But as a substitute, I'm using a half a cup of, this is whipped cream cheese, which is actually pretty light. You know, there's equivalent of 2 tablespoons of cream cheese here per serving. It's only about 50 calories worth of cream cheese, and you're getting some calcium and some protein in there. And then I'm using also a half a cup of plain non-fat Greek yogurt. You don't want this dessert to be super, super sweet because the coffee is really the standout flavor here. And so if you made it really sweet, then it would just taste like coffee ice cream. But we want it, this is so sophisticated. It's a grown-up dessert. All right, so we've got half a cup of water, half a cup of yogurt, half a cup of whipped cream cheese, and as I said, then our 4 scoops of high protein iced coffee. You're going to whisk this together. Now, when you first do this, it's going to look kind of lumpy, but as you continue to stir it, it's going to get super, super smooth, and it's just going to make this amazing sort of almost like a pudding that's going to go inside. Now, it looks as if you could almost eat it now, and it's very tempting, I have to tell you. But it is going to go in the refrigerator, which is just going to give it time to kind of set up a little bit, and it'll give time for the graham crackers to absorb some of this, and just to allow the flavors to blend a little bit. All right, and then this is just going to get poured on top, and the texture is amazing. You can see it's really creamy. It's nice and thick. And we've just got this wonderful combination of this coffee and the yogurt, which is kind of tangy. And then, of course, that cream cheese, which gives it a rich feeling. But, you know, as I said, I'm using a whipped cream cheese, which means it's got some air in it. So it's really not that high in calories. If you don't have cream cheese in your market, a really good substitute for this one would be ricotta cheese. I think most people have that. Ricotta cheese is a little sweeter than cream cheese, and it's a little bit grainier, but it would work really well if you just whip it enough so that you get all the get it nice and smooth. It'll be fine. All right, and then this just gets covered with a piece of plastic wrap. I'm just going to cover all 4 of these together. Oh, I forgot the final step. We have to dust it with cocoa before I do that. So this is plain unsweetened cocoa powder. You can put as much or as little of this on top as you want to. I like to do this through a little sifter because sometimes when you get cocoa powder, it can be a little lumpy. That's natural that it does that. And so if you do this, you get this really pretty, nice, very smooth shower of cocoa powder. I just leave it on the rim because I think it looks pretty that way. As much as you want. It adds almost nothing in terms of calories because there's no sweetener in there, but you're getting all the benefits of the cocoa, which is great. All right, so covering this just kind of lightly with some plastic wrap. This is going to go in the fridge. You want to put it in there for about 4 hours so that it just gives it time to kind of set. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to pull out the other 2 that I made. I actually made both versions so you could see them. So that's going in there. And then let's take out the 2 that I made because as I said, I made one with the PDM and then I made one with our iced coffee. One thing that you're going to see is that when you do it with the protein drink mix, it really takes up the liquid, so you have to actually add quite a bit more water to the recipe, which you'll see when you compare the two. That's also why this one, the volume is bigger. This is the one that I made with the protein drink mix, so you can see it's a little bit bigger than this one. I put them in these clear dishes so that you could kind of see what the layers look like. This is the one that I made with our high protein iced coffee. It's a little bit looser, shall we say. But what I'm doing is I'm scooping down here, and I'm able to get, I can feel the graham cracker at the bottom. The texture of this is just heavenly. It's just creamy. It's so creamy. It's so smooth. The coffee flavor is just perfect. And as I said, it's not too sweet, which is the reason that I really like it. It's just we didn't have to add any sugar. Because I just want to eat some more of that, but I won't, not in front of you anyway. And then this one, you can see with the protein drink mix, is a little bit thicker. As I said, it took up a lot more liquid. So this one's almost more like a mousse. Very different texture. This one is not as sweet. So that's one thing that you'll need to know, is that if you use the PDM, it's going to taste a little bit different. But it's a pretty good substitute if you don't have the high protein iced coffee. One thing that's fun with this one too, I was thinking about this when I made this, is you could probably make some fun variations with this protein drink mix idea. In other words, if you left out the instant coffee, you could probably put some other things in there. So in other words, use the PDM, use the yogurt, use the cream cheese. Maybe you could put some crushed fruit in there and make it more like a cheesecake. So I don't know, that could be a future show, who knows? But if you do something like that, let me know. Anyway, I'm going to take one more bite of this because it's here. And don't go away, because I will be right back to give you the whole nutrition breakdown on this amazing high protein iced coffee tiramisu.